In our last lesson, we discussed the morphology of hair, which is the structure of hair. And today, we're going to focus more on the crime scene approach to hair and hair analysis. And we're going to be discussing how it can be used as evidence in a criminal investigation. So be sure that you're taking good notes. Pause the video as you need to. All right, now hair is not new to being used as evidence in forensic investigations or criminalistics. It has been around for quite a while. So since the late 19th century, hair's been a source of evidence in criminal investigation. Careful analysis of hair can provide important clues in an investigation. Due to its small size, a criminal could unknowingly leave hair behind at a crime scene or even pick up hair from a crime scene. And in the previous lesson, we learned that the average person sheds about 40 to 125 hairs per day. So that means that it is very likely if somebody is at a crime scene, they either left behind a hair or picked up a hair. Now, since the characteristics of human hair can vary widely based on ancestry, an individual's habits, their living environment, and DNA, it can offer important information about a victim or victims and even a suspect. Now, hair's unique because it can be considered class evidence or individual evidence. And back when we talked about our introduction to forensics lesson where we talked about types of evidence, we discussed this. So hair can be class evidence if it's found without the root or follicle, and it's considered individual evidence if it's found with the root or follicle. So depending on how the hair is found, it's classified in different ways. So hairs with an attached follicle or root, we learned in the last lesson, contains nuclear DNA. This is the DNA that's found within the cell's nucleus, and it can provide individual evidence, which means it can match to a person. Now, if a hair is found and it lacks a root or a follicle, it still contains DNA, but this DNA is a different form. It's called mitochondrial DNA. It's not as useful as nuclear DNA. And again, we will talk about the different types of DNA found at a crime scene when we get to the DNA section of our forensic evidence unit. But for now, you just need to know that hairs, depending on how they're found, they can be classified as class evidence or individual evidence. Hairs with a follicle or root are going to be considered individual evidence, and hairs that lack a root or follicle are considered class evidence. Now, hairs can be observed in different ways. So we can make observations about hairs macroscopically. Macroscopic properties are just properties that we notice without the aid of a microscope. We can see this with the naked eye. So this might be hair color, texture, length. Our microscopic properties are going to require the aid of a microscope. So these are things that we notice about hair when we view the hair specimen under the microscope. This can be pigmentation of the cortex. Remember from the last lesson, that's the coloring of the hair. The types of scales on the cuticle, which direction they might be pointing, and then also medulla pattern. Now, the macroscopic and microscopic hairs, characteristics of hair do differ greatly. And you can see from this picture, this image, hairs look different depending on their origin. So hairs can vary in shape, they can vary in length, they can vary in diameter, texture, and color. Hairs even differ within different groups, ancestral groups. Hairs can be different depending on whether they come from an animal or a human. And we're going to camp out here for just a second because this is applicable to forensic crime scene investigation. So animal hair and human hair do have differences. You can see in this image here the difference between a human hair and then some animal hairs. Their pigmentation can differ. Their medullary index can differ. And we're going to talk about medullary index towards the end of this lesson. Also, their cuticle type can differ. Now, if you are one of my students, you have this chart in your notes, and one of the things that I want you to know is I want you to be able to describe differences in pigment, medulla, and scale structure between human hair and animal hair. So if you will, I want you to pause the video here and just make sure that you get these differences in your notes. Now, we have a wide variety of areas on the human body that hairs can originate. Hairs can come from a person's head, their eyebrow, eyelashes. They can come from a person's beard, the pubic area, the body. You can have body hairs, underarm hairs. And so all of these hairs can be used. If they're left behind at a crime scene and an investigator can find them, they can be useful. Now, forensic lab analysts are going to use different methods for analyzing hair. We're going to talk about just a few of those methods today. So hair can be collected in a variety of different ways. Hairs can be plucked. They can shake items to retrieve hairs, scrape surfaces. Adhesives can be used to collect hairs from victims or objects or clothing. Hair can then be analyzed using microscopy, which is the use of a microscope, a high-powered microscope. And then there's also some chemical testing that can be done. Now, when using microscopy, investigators use a comparison microscope, and they make comparisons between the medullary index of a suspect hair and evidence hair at the same time. So they're looking at the hairs at the same time. And a lot of times these electron microscopes are very expensive because they are very high-powered. They can provide remarkable detail because they can magnify up to 50,000 times the original size of the hair. So this is an example, a picture of a hair cuticle or several hairs, and the cuticle being magnified under an electron microscope. All right, just a few seconds ago, I mentioned the difference between animal hair and human hair. One of the differences is the medullary index. And so we're going to take just a second to talk about what the medullary index of a hair is, how it's found, and then how you can determine if a hair is animal hair or human hair based on this medullary index. So the ratio of diameter of the medulla to the diameter of the entire hair is known as the medullary index. And we can find the medullary index with a formula. And I put that formula up on your screen. I want you to make sure that you write this down. And while you're writing the formula down, one of the things that I want you to know is that if we plug in some information about the diameter of the medulla and the diameter of the hair shaft, and we find the medullary index, if the medullary index is 0.5 or greater, then the hair most likely is animal hair. If the medullary index is 0.33 or less, the hair is most likely human hair. So what I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to first determine the medullary index using the formula on the screen. So width of the medulla divided by the diameter of the entire hair shaft. And then once you find your answer, I want you to use that to determine if the hair is animal or human hair. All right, so let's practice. So suppose this sample of hair has a diameter of 110 microns and has a medulla that measures 58 microns. And then I ask you what's the medullary index of the hair, so that's where your formula comes in. And then you're going to use your answer to determine if the hair is human hair or animal hair. Okay, so let's see how this would work out. So I've written down my formula. I have my formula here, and then it tells me in the problem that the medulla, the width of the medulla measures 58 microns, so you can see that's my numerator. And then the diameter of the hair is going to be 110 microns, which becomes my denominator. And when I divide 58 divided by 110, I get a medullary index of 0.53. And if you'll go back, a medullary index greater than 0.5 means that we most likely have an animal hair. All right, if hair is collected as class evidence, remember that's no follicle, no root, forensic scientists can make observations about the macroscopic and microscopic features of the hair. And based on these observations, the hair would be narrowed down to a class of suspects. So, for example, this hair on the screen belongs to an Asian female, which is a very broad category. It could be helpful in producing a lead, but it's not going to be hardcore scientific evidence that you're going to be able to use in court. It is important to note that anything ingested or absorbed through the skin also becomes part of your hair. And so this is proven to be beneficial for forensic investigators because they can do tests. Since the hair doesn't readily decompose, they can use chemical tests to help establish a timeline of a suspect or victim's exposure to toxins and even drugs. There's a specific test that I want you to know about. It's called the neutron activation analysis. It can be used to detect toxins or chemicals within the hair. And this test can provide links between hair evidence and then circumstances surrounding the hair. It can sort of paint a picture of the victim and maybe their lifestyle, or, if they were poisoned, we would be able to determine that with neutron activation analysis. Just a fun fact, if you're familiar with Napoleon Bonaparte, he was a French political leader that it was believed he died of stomach cancer, but later his hair was found and tested using neutron activation analysis, and it was determined that he actually was poisoned with arsenic. Other chemical tests like gas chromatography can also be used to identify and quantify drugs and toxins, even heavy metals. This test can also assess nutritional deficiencies as well. Now, it is very, very important to understand the use of hair in criminal investigations and its reliability. So over the years, criminalists have tried to isolate physical and chemical properties of hair that could then serve as individual characteristics of identity. But so far, only partial success has been achieved. And so today, hair analysis alone is insufficient evidence for conviction. Now, there is an exception. If a hair is found with a follicle and that follicle contains DNA, then remember that's an individual form of evidence. So if it links to a person, then that's different. Then you have DNA evidence. But hair analysis should only be used to provide leads, or once it goes to court, it has to be presented with other evidence that's supported by science. All right, that ends our lesson for today, and I will see you in the next lesson.